Hello, I'm Chuck Martin, and welcome to the Voices of the Internet of Things. With me today is Gabriel Aleixo, Managing Director, Behavioral Economics at System1 Research, part of System1 Group, the behavioral science and marketing company formerly known as Brainjuicer. Gabriel heads the Latin American division of System1 Research, whose focus is brand strategy, communication, and innovation with Fortune 500 companies. Gabriel is a former marketing services director of Philips and senior marketing intelligence manager at Beiersdorf in Brazil. Welcome, Gabriel. Good to be here.
Thanks a lot, Chuck. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks a lot for the time to talk to me.
So can we start? Can you tell the audience a bit about what System1 Group is? I'm not sure everyone is familiar with it.
Sure, of course. So System1 Group is a company that was formerly known as Brainjuicer. So we've been around since 2000. We were a British company. And in the beginning of this year, we rebranded because we really became a marketing group. We have an agency, an ad agency called System1 Agency. And we have the research side of the business, which is System1 Research, which is where I work. And System1 Group wants to promote a new thinking on marketing, both in producing and predicting the effectiveness of marketing by applying behavioral sciences. So our goal is to help clients achieve profitable growth with zero waste on their marketing spend. We believe that nowadays, and based on our own studies, we know that at least a third of all the marketing spend in the world goes to waste. You might as well just set a pile of fire and throw this money on the garbage because it doesn't create anything for the companies. It doesn't add any value. And we think this is way too much money to go to waste. So by applying behavioral sciences and by creating new models and new algorithms to predict the success of marketing, we hope to help our clients achieve profitable growth on their advertising campaigns, with the branding initiatives, with innovation, and with shopper initiatives as well.
So do you work closely with the ad agency part of the group?
We are a small company, I would say, so we are very close and we are always discussing opportunities together. The businesses are independent. So the ad agency uses the research services as part of their business model to predict the success of their own campaigns before even showing to the clients. So this is the ad agency's promises. They will never propose anything to the client that hasn't been proven to be effective to generate growth. But we have a completely independent business also on the research side, and most of our clients work with us on that part.
So does the group then have advertising clients and then separately have research clients?
That's correct.
And sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're different?
Right now, I think we have maybe one example of a client which is the same, but most of them are different.
Okay. So tell me a bit about the behavioral science before we get into the virtual reality aspects, which I think is extremely innovative. Tell me about the behavioral science aspect of what you do.
So behavioral sciences is really what is behind everything that we have been doing in our company since at least 2005. So it is a very, very exciting area of knowledge that has been really that's revolutionizing the way we understand consumer behavior, that we understand people's behavior and choices. I mean, this year, Richard Thaler was awarded Nobel Prize for his works on behavioral sciences, on behavioral economics. So we started over 10 years ago thinking about ways to apply those concepts coming from behavioral economics to marketing, because marketing as a discipline has emerged from a traditional school of thought, which comes all the way back from traditional economics, that assumes that people are logic decision makers, that consumers are going to evaluate their choices, and they are going to pick the one that is more adequate for their needs. But in reality, we think much less than we think as consumers. We make intuitive choices. We are influenced by our emotional states. We're influenced by our habits. So this is what we bring to the discussion. Marketing that really generates profitable growth works with this intuitive decision-making system, which is the system one of our brain, and not with the logical part. And this is what we think is a very big revolution in the way of thinking about business, of thinking about marketing. There are many areas Governments are applying this for public policies. Finance companies are applying this to improve the performances of their portfolios. And we are bringing this to the marketing world.
So before virtual reality, how did you do shopper marketing, for example?
So as an industry, research has always relied on observation and questioning to understand consumer choices at the point of sales. But the problem is, it is very difficult to really control all the variables that are in play on a point of sale context. So you can imagine if you want to run an experiment, you need to have a control store and you need to have a test store to see if you change one of the products or if you change a material, what is the effect on consumer choices. And you would need to control everything else. But the point is, you cannot control if it is raining, if there are more or less people in the store, or sometimes even things like if you have enough products on the shelf. Those are very difficult things to control. So the research industry created solutions which are either based on replication or reproducing halls, which we call hall tests, and then we try to recreate the environment on a central location or on a big hall where we observe and we ask people what they're doing and why. But by doing that, we know that we are taking people out of the context. They know that they're being observed, and we tend to only measure the post-rationalization of their actions. So on the other hand, you have solutions which rely on online questionnaires and a 2D interface to try and replicate the choice context of consumers as well. So this is a very interesting and efficient approach, but it also lacks the full context of what influences decisions in a point of sale. So you can focus specifically on one element, like a change of packaging or the introduction of a communication material, but you will never account for the whole context by using a browser window on your computer. So those are the two traditional routes that the industry has used for the past, I would say, 30, 40 years. But now with virtual reality, we can really overcome many of those limitations on those two methods and really provide a full context and an immersive context for research.
So in research, is there a difference in your experience in what people say in research versus what they do?
There is a very big difference, mainly if you ask people to explain their actions, because most of our choices are not driven by rational thinking. They are driven by what I was mentioning before, those emotional states. There are so many cognitive biases that the behavioral scientists study, and those things affect our behavior, making us act irrationally, as Dan Ariely would say. Once we are asked, why did we do that? Why did you choose this product? Why did you pick this option? You will try to come up as a human being or as a consumer, you will try to come up with a logical explanation for what you did, even if what you did was not rational. So when you ask people direct questions and you expect them to be able to explain their behavior, you will probably only get post-rationalization. And this is why many people say there is this quote that people lie on marketing research. They don't say what they do. They don't do what they think and things like that. But in reality, it's not because people are consciously lying and deceiving the research. It's because we really do not know what drives our behavior. So, of course, there are many, many techniques that try to overcome this and ways of analyzing the responses and so on. But we believe that the most important thing is to change the model and try to measure the things that drive behavior and not focus on the explanation for that.
Okay, so let's get into what you did with virtual reality. First of all, why did you look at virtual reality as a potential research tool?
So we started thinking about virtual reality last year, mainly because, of course, it is a technology that is becoming well developed and becoming more adopted in the industry, and it has been used for many other areas in marketing, both to create experiences for consumers, but also for training purposes and planning purposes and so on. But what we saw is that when it comes to testing and validating the effectiveness or predicting the effectiveness of POS communication, so point of sales materials and activations. Most of the things that go to the point of sales are never tested because of those complexities that I mentioned before, the difficulty of doing that. But the reality is 2/3 of all the marketing spend in the world goes to the point of sales. So for any given brand, it is more likely that most of the investment that they do goes to the point of sales, while they really do not validate that. So we thought about a way of trying to overcome these limitations that we saw today in the methodologies, and virtual reality really sounded as a very promising approach. And this is why we decided to test and validate the technology as a viable approach to predict consumer behavior in the real world.
So tell me what you did with VR.
So we set out to prove first if VR was a valid tool to replicate real world behavior, what kinds of different interventions or different activations we could measure using VR, and of course try to come up with a viable offer for clients that they could use in their marketing strategies. So we partnered with 3 companies in the beginning of the year, and we created 3 virtual aisles where we put 500 consumers to do their shopping. And we didn't ask them to do specific things. We tried to replicate as much as possible the normal shopping context. We told them just to look around, pick the products that they would normally buy, and then let us know when they were done. So we created Walmart-style stores, and we had 3 different aisles. We had a yogurt aisle, a candy aisle, a chocolate aisle, and a fresh produce aisle. And we did A/B testing experiments. So we always had a control cell where nothing was changed. The aisle would be very similar to what you would find on a real Walmart. And then on some parts of the experiment, we changed either the packaging of a product, we changed the prices, we changed the communication material in the point of sales, and we measured what was the influence of those changes in consumer choices.
And one of the companies was a chocolate company?
Exactly. One of the companies, chocolates, was Hershey's. So they partnered with us to understand the impact of different types of communication material in the point of sales, the different impact that this could have on Hershey's sales.
And what did you find?
So it was a very interesting result because we tested, we had a control cell with no communication material on the shelf and 2 test cells. One of them had a clear branding banner. So we had a piece of communication on top of the shelf with the name Hershey's and with the names Reese's and the colors of the brands and so on. So that was very explicit branding. And on the other version, on the other cell, we had what we called an advertising prime. So we only used visuals from Hershey's TV campaigns, which are very strong and very emotional, but there was no mention to the Hershey's brand. And what we saw is that when we did the explicit branding, people actually bought less Hershey's on the virtual environment. They on the control cell, 14% of the people bought Hershey's. On this explicit branding cell, only 10% bought Hershey's. But when we did the implicit branding, or the advertising prime, as we called it, almost 19% chose Hershey's. So we managed to increase the share of Hershey's by only cueing or exposing people to visuals of their campaigns without actually mentioning the brand. And the interesting thing was that when we tried to understand what was going on there, we saw that the explicit branding actually disrupted the shopper's experience. People took longer to choose a product. They thought twice what they were doing. So we actually put people on a System 2 mindset. We made them overthink their choice. And when they overthink things, they bought less Hershey's. But when we just referenced those implicit associations, those implicit positive associations of the brand with the visuals, we didn't disrupt their journey, and we actually managed to increase sales.
Isn't that counterintuitive? I mean, wouldn't a brand think that if they put a Hershey's, you would think that people customers who like Hershey's really like the brand. Isn't it counterintuitive that someone would think, a brand would think, that promoting the brand would help?
Yes, it is very counterintuitive, but it's actually not the first time we have results like this. A couple of years ago, when we were doing real world tests of similar tests, but not using virtual reality, we got to the same conclusions for another client from the financial services area. And what is the case is, at System1, we have a model to explain consumer choices for brands and products. And we talk about 3 different shortcuts that people use to choose a product. The first one is if you heard about the product, if it is on your mind, if it's the mental availability, what we call fame. If you know a product, you will probably think it is a good option for you if you have heard of it. So fame is important. The second one is how you feel about the product. So you're absolutely right. People who buy Hershey's usually like Hershey's and they have positive feelings about the brand. So by eliciting these feelings and maybe recalling the positive feelings that people have with the brand, you usually manage to also increase sales. And the last one is how easy it is to recognize, how clear it is for consumers that this is the brand, how easy it is to choose it. So in this sense, we have distinctive assets or brand assets play an important role. Using distinctive colors, shapes, and formats and logos, this will all help consumers make a good choice. So in the case of Hershey's, Hershey's is a very famous brand. It is very unlikely that people walking down the chocolate aisle will not think about Hershey's in the first place. It is definitely one of the top 3 brands in everybody's minds. So you do not need to remind people about Hershey's. They definitely already have Hershey's on their mind. What happened is when we just showed the brand Hershey's, just trying to remind them about the brand without actually adding anything on top of that, we disrupted people's thinking. They thought about there was something odd. What are they trying to do here? Is it a promotion, or are they trying to influence my decision? And then we created a behavior that is not interesting for the brand because it's an over-rationalized choice. So for a brand like Hershey's, it was more important to create positive emotions than to simply create mental availability or awareness. For other brands, it's going to be different. If you are launching a new product or if you have a small brand, you will definitely be interested in being on people's minds. So probably for a smaller brand, just showing your logo, just showing your colors is going to help sell more. So there is not a one solution for all brands. Brands have different shapes and forms in people's minds. So we have to understand what is the situation of the brand in people's minds to be able to create the best interventions in each case.
So when you go back to a brand like a Hershey or someone else and say, guess what, promoting your name doesn't help, how do they take that?
Well, they actually thought it was very interesting. One of our key contacts at the client, he was already championing this kind of thing internally for a while. He had this perception that simply showing your name would not help a brand like Hershey's. And we helped him prove that internally. So what we were saying is that it is not that you should not promote your name, period. Is that just promoting your name is not going to help a brand like Hershey. You need to use some other assets of your brand. And in this case, the emotions were the most important ones. And this is what made people buy even more. So it is, as I said in the beginning, those behavioral concepts, cognitive biases, System 1 thinking, many of those ideas are very counterintuitive, but they are just, we can't prove them in real life. It just happens. This is how our brain decides. So in many cases, the results that we get using this kind of approach are counterintuitive from a logical standpoint, but from a behavioral standpoint, they make perfect sense.
And for virtual reality, how difficult was it to get off the street consumers to put on I think you use HTC Vive headsets and immersive technology. How difficult was it to get them to actually use virtual reality for this?
Well, this was one of the things we also needed to validate, because we had heard before cases of other companies quoting that people get sick or they do not get used to the technology. So we were a bit scared of how well people would adopt it. So we had 500 participants on our study, and the first thing they had to do was what we called an orientation exercise. So they just had a bunch of bread loaves in front of them, and they just had to pick up the bread and put it in the basket. On average, after 1.5 minutes, people were perfectly fine with the whole environment. They were okay to proceed to the actual aisles. So it took 90 seconds for people on average to get used to the interface itself and really forget that they were using a completely new interface for them. And the vast majority of the respondents that we worked with had never had any experience with VR before. So this shows one of the power of the technology that we talk a lot about is that it really has the power to hack our brains and put our brains in an intuitive System 1 thinking. Very, very quickly, we forget about the interface and we just act normally as we would do on a real environment.
So using virtual reality for this kind of research is very, very new. Where do you take it from here?
So right now, we are still developing the technological part of the survey, because in order to create realistic environments, you need to model all the different products and you need to model all the different digital assets. And this is something the technology is evolving very fast, and the tools to model those environments are evolving very fast, and we want to stay ahead there. So we are focusing a lot now on continuing developing this the technology part to make it more accessible, cheaper, and faster for clients to be able to run projects with us. And we are also exploring discussions with some clients in order to do similar projects or similar pilots in other types of retail environments. So we did a Walmart style store. We really believe, based on behavioral principles, that the behavior of a consumer on a Walmart will not be radically different than what you do on Whole Foods, a Target, or a 7-Eleven, or even a bar or a restaurant, for what that matters. But we are exploring with clients the opportunity to create those additional tests and have stronger validation for the tool.
Well, we will check back in with you later. This is great stuff. Gabriel Aleixo, thank you very much, and thank you all for listening to the Voices of the Internet of Things.
Thanks a lot, Chuck.